I'm Megan, 29 female. I work as a senior data analyst, a job that suits my personality perfectly. I find comfort in numbers, in patterns, in things that have a logical order. For the past 5 years, my life has been defined by two things: my career and this house. It's not just any house. It's the one my grandparents, Arthur and Alina, built with their own hands. Every floorboard, every window frame holds a memory of them. They left it to me when they passed, and I've tried my best to honor their legacy by keeping it filled with warmth and life. I thought my life was stable, predictable, and safe within these walls. But I recently learned that the most chaotic and illogical things don't come from spreadsheets or data sets. They come from the people you're supposed to trust the most. My own parents gave me 5 days to get out of my own home, but when the day of my eviction arrived, they weren't met with moving boxes. They were met with my legal team, and the foundation of their entire world cracked right in front of my eyes. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It started on a Sunday evening, the kind that usually felt peaceful. The air was cool, the scent of jasmine from the garden drifted through the open kitchen window, and I was planning my work week. The doorbell rang, which was unusual for that time of night. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked through the peephole, I saw the familiar silhouettes of my parents, Anthony and Victoria, with my younger brother, Luke, standing slightly behind them, shifting his weight like he always does when he's uncomfortable. A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. My family didn't make surprise visits, especially not all 3 of them together. Their visits were usually prearranged, carefully scheduled events that felt more like formal inspections than casual drop-ins. I opened the door, forcing a smile. "Mom, Dad, Luke, what's going on?" My father, Anthony, a man whose posture seemed permanently fixed in a state of confrontation, stepped forward without waiting for an invitation. He was a retired construction foreman, and he carried himself with the belief that any space he occupied was his to command. "Megan, we need to talk," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. My mother, Victoria, followed him in, her expression a practiced mask of gentle concern that never quite reached her eyes. Luke trailed behind them, avoiding my gaze, his focus glued to his phone. They arranged themselves in the living room, the room where my grandmother used to read me stories, and the air immediately felt heavy and foreign. I remained standing by the doorway, a subconscious refusal to get comfortable. "Okay," I said slowly. "Is everything all right?" My father cleared his throat, a sound that always preceded a declaration. "Your mother and I have been talking, and Luke has some exciting new prospects." I glanced at my brother. At 25, Luke's main prospect was becoming a moderately successful, freelance influencer, which, as far as I could tell, involved taking pictures of himself in expensive clothes he couldn't afford and posting them with vague, inspirational captions. He hadn't held a steady job since he dropped out of college 3 years ago. "That's great," I offered, unsure of where this was going. "It is," my father continued, his tone hardening. "He's planning to launch a new lifestyle brand. He needs a base of operations, a place that looks professional, a place with some class." He gestured around the living room, at the polished hardwood floors my grandfather had laid, at the stone fireplace he had built. "This place is perfect." A cold dread washed over me. I knew exactly what he was implying. "He can't live here," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "There's no room, and I work from home." My mother finally spoke, her voice soft and placating. "Honey, that's what we need to discuss. It's not about him moving in with you." She paused, exchanging a look with my father, who then delivered the blow. "We want you to move out. We're giving the house to Luke." I stared at them, convinced I had misheard. The words didn't compute. They were like pieces of a puzzle from a completely different box. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "This is my house. Grandma and Grandpa left it to me." My father scoffed, a dismissive, ugly sound. "They left it to you to look after, Megan. It was always meant to stay in the family. Your grandfather would have wanted his grandson to have it. A man needs a solid foundation." The absurdity of his statement was breathtaking. Luke, who had never so much as hammered a nail, was more entitled to this house than I was, simply because he was a man. That's not true, I insisted, my voice rising. Their will was very Lear, this house belongs to me. Wills can be contested, Anthony shot back, his face reddening. This is a family matter, not a legal one. Luke needs this house. You have a good job, you can afford your own place. A small apartment is all you need. I looked at my brother, who was now studiously examining a scuff on his designer sneakers. Luke, do you have anything to say about this? He shrugged, still not meeting my eyes. It's a good opportunity for me, Meg. The aesthetic is perfect for my brand. The aesthetic? He was talking about my home, my grandparents' legacy, as if it were a backdrop for his social media posts. The sheer, unadulterated selfishness of it all made me feel sick. My mother tried to frame it as a favor. Think of it as helping your brother, sweetie. He's had a rough go of it. This could be the thing that finally sets him on the right path. Family helps family. The hypocrisy was galling. They had never helped me. When I was saving for a down payment on a car, they told me it built character. When I needed help with tuition, they told me student loans were a fact of life. But for Luke, they were willing to throw me out of my own home. The conversation, if it could be called that, devolved quickly. I refused. They insisted. My father's voice got louder, his arguments more circular and nonsensical. He claimed they had a right to the house as their parents' only son. He claimed I was being selfish and ungrateful. He even suggested I was disrespecting my grandparents' memory by clinging to a property that a real man of the family should have. Finally, he stood up, his face a mask of fury. We're not asking, Megan. We're telling you, we've already spoken to a realtor about the transfer. We'll be fair. We'll give you until next Friday to clear out your personal belongings. That's 5 days. You can't be serious, I whispered, the reality of their threat crashing down on me. You have no right. We have every right, he boomed. This is our family's home, and we decide who lives in it. Be out by Friday. If you're not, we'll come and pack your things for you. He turned and stormed out of the house, my mother scurrying after him, casting one last pleading, pathetic look in my direction. Luke was the last to leave. He finally looked at me, a flicker of something, guilt maybe, or just annoyance in his eyes. Don't make this a big deal, okay? It's for the best. Then he was gone. I was left standing in the silence of my living room, the words "out by Friday" echoing in the air. The peace of my Sunday evening had been shattered, replaced by an ultimatum that was as cruel as it was unbelievable. They thought they could just take it all away. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The silence that followed their departure was deafening. I sank onto the sofa, the one where my grandmother used to sit while knitting, and tried to process the sheer audacity of what had just happened. My own family had walked into my home and served me an eviction notice based on a foundation of pure entitlement. The initial shock gave way to a cold, simmering anger. This wasn't just about a house. It was about a lifetime of being treated as secondary. It was about every birthday where Luke's gift was extravagant while mine was an afterthought. It was about every achievement of mine that was met with polite indifference while Luke's slightest whim was celebrated. This was just the culmination of 29 years of playing second fiddle to the golden child. I spent the rest of that night sleepless, my mind racing. I replayed the conversation over and over, dissecting every word, every justification they had thrown at me. Your grandfather would have wanted his grandson to have it. That line, more than any other, felt like a lie. My grandfather, Arthur, was a man of principle. He valued hard work, honesty, and fairness. He loved me and he loved Luke, but he was not a fool. He saw Luke's lack of drive and my parents' constant enabling. He often told me, Megan, this house was built on sweat and integrity. It needs someone with the same values to care for it. He would never have wanted it to become a prop for Luke's vapid, online persona. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I rarely ever did. I couldn't focus on data sets and projections when my own life felt like it was spiraling out of control. I needed to find proof, something tangible to fight back with. I knew the will was in the safe deposit box at my bank, but my father's confidence unnerved me. Wills can be contested, he'd said. We've already spoken to a realtor about the transfer. How could they be so sure of themselves? Were they bluffing, or did they have something I didn't know about? I started in my grandfather's old office, a small, wood-paneled room that I had mostly left untouched. It was filled with his books on carpentry and engineering, old blueprints, and meticulously organized files. I spent hours sifting through cabinets searching for anything related to the house's ownership. I found the original deed, property tax records from the past 30 years, and stacks of receipts for every repair and renovation. Everything was in my grandparents' names, with no mention of my father having any legal stake. Yet, the feeling that I was missing something gnawed at me. I remembered my father mentioning a transfer. What kind of transfer? A quitclaim deed? A trust? My parents weren't financially savvy. The idea of them setting up a complex legal instrument seemed unlikely. It was in a dusty accordion folder labeled Household Utilities that I found the first anomaly. Tucked between old electricity bills and water statements was a document from a few years prior, dated shortly before my grandmother's health had taken a serious turn. It was a home equity line of credit application. My grandparents were frugal. They never borrowed money if they could help it. I examined the document closely. It had been filled out but never filed. The loan was for a significant amount, and the stated purpose was business investment. The application was in my grandparents' names, but the handwriting wasn't my grandfather's neat, architectural block letters, nor my grandmother's elegant cursive. It was my father's messy scrawl. The signatures at the bottom were what made my blood run cold. My grandfather's signature was passable, if a little shaky, but my grandmother's was wrong. She'd had arthritis in her later years, and her signature had become a wobbly but distinct series of loops. The signature on this paper was smooth, fluid, and bore only a passing resemblance to the real thing. It was a forgery, and a clumsy one at that. They had tried to take out a loan against the house, using my grandparents as collateral for one of my father's failed get-rich-quick schemes. My grandfather must have discovered it and put a stop to it before it was submitted. The memory of a huge argument from around that time suddenly surfaced. I had been visiting for the weekend, and I overheard my grandfather shouting at my father in his office. "You will not gamble with this house, Anthony, not while I'm alive." My father had stormed out, red-faced and silent. At the time, I thought it was just about money. Now I realized it was something far more sinister. They had tried to defraud my grandparents. This discovery changed everything. It wasn't just about greed, it was about a pattern of deceit. If they were willing to forge a signature for a loan, what else were they capable of? My father's confident threat about contesting the will suddenly seemed more menacing. It wasn't the threat of a legitimate legal challenge. It was the threat of a man who believed rules were for other people, a man who was willing to cheat and lie to get what he wanted. My search became more frantic. I wasn't just looking for proof of my ownership anymore. I was looking for evidence of their deception. I thought about the will. It had been drafted by their longtime family lawyer, a man who had since retired and moved away. My parents had handled the execution of the will after my grandmother, the last to pass, was gone. They had given me my copy, and everything had seemed straightforward. But now, doubt crept in. What if the document they filed with the court wasn't the same as the one my grandparents had signed? What if the copy they gave me was just for show? The idea was horrifying, but it fit their pattern of behavior. The forged signature on the loan application was a whisper from the past, a warning about the lengths my family would go to. They hadn't just suddenly become greedy. They had been this way for years, hiding their true nature behind a facade of familial duty. The ultimatum wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a move they had likely been planning for a long time. They were just waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, they thought that moment had come. They thought I was just a quiet, compliant data analyst who would crumble under pressure. They were about to find out how badly they had miscalculated. The fight for my home had just become a war against their lies. Tuesday morning was heavy with dread. The house felt too big, too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a countdown. 2 days had passed since the ultimatum, and only 3 remained until their deadline. The discovery of the forged loan application had armed me with the knowledge of their duplicity, but it wasn't a silver bullet. It was proof of a past attempt at fraud, not proof that they couldn't legally force me out now. My father's confidence still haunted me. I needed something definitive, something that would dismantle their entire claim. I decided to focus my search on the one place I hadn't thoroughly checked, the attic. It was a place of memories, filled with dusty boxes of holiday decorations, old photo albums, and forgotten treasures from my childhood. It was also where my grandmother kept her most personal belongings. She used to say the attic was the house's memory bank. As I pulled down the folding ladder, the familiar scent of cedar and old paper filled the air. The space was hot and stuffy, with only a single bare bulb casting long, dancing shadows across a landscape of cardboard boxes and ghost-like shapes draped in white sheets. I started methodically, box by box, feeling like an archaeologist unearthing a lost civilization. I found my old report cards, my grandfather's war medals, and a box of my mother's high school yearbooks. None of it was what I was looking for. Hours passed. Dust coated my clothes and sweat trickled down my back. I was beginning to lose hope, thinking that maybe there was nothing else to find, that I was just chasing ghosts. Then I saw it. Tucked away in the darkest corner, behind a stack of old suitcases, was a small, intricately carved cedar chest. It was my grandmother Aliner's hope chest. I remembered her telling me stories about it when I was a little girl. She had received it from her own mother and had kept her most precious items inside. I had always assumed it was filled with old linens and lace, things for a future bride. I hadn't seen it in years and had forgotten it was even up here. I dragged the heavy chest into the center of the room. Your grandfather, ever the clever engineer, devised a plan. We created 2 wills. The one your father has is legally drafted, but it is not our final word. The document in this envelope with this letter is our true and final testament. We had it drafted by a different lawyer, a man of unimpeachable integrity, and signed it a month after the one we gave your father. In the eyes of the law, the most recent will invalidate all previous versions. This document leaves the house and the majority of our savings directly and solely to you. There is no trust. There is no ambiguity. It is yours and yours alone. She went on to explain the details. The lawyer's name was Isaac Vance, an old friend of my grandfather, from his army days. She provided his contact information and instructed me to reach out to him immediately if I ever felt my ownership of the house was threatened. She wrote about her fears, about the loan application they had discovered, and about their heartbreaking decision to create this secret failsafe to protect me from my own family. The final paragraph brought tears to my eyes. Live in this house, my dear girl. Fill it with laughter and love. Honor the work of our hands by building a life of your own within these walls. Do not let their bitterness tarnish your spirit. Your grandfather and I will always be with you, in every beam and every brick. We trust you to be the keeper of our home. We love you. I sat there in the dusty attic, clutching the letter to my chest, and cried. I cried for the loss of my grandparents, for the love they had shown me even after they were gone, and for the profound, painful betrayal of my parents. This letter wasn't just a legal strategy, it was a final gift from them. It was their way of reaching through time to protect me. After a few minutes, I wiped my tears and picked up the will. It was exactly as she had described. It was notarized, witnessed, and dated a full month after the fraudulent one my parents were holding. This was it. This was the silver bullet. This was the foundation of my defense. My fear and uncertainty were replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They had underestimated me, but more importantly, they had underestimated the foresight and love of my grandparents. The Friday deadline was no longer a threat. It was an appointment, and I would be ready. Wednesday arrived with a newfound sense of purpose. The letter and the will from the cedar chest were my shield and my sword, but I knew that simply possessing them wasn't enough. I needed to understand the full scope of my parents' deception and build an airtight case. My first and most important call was to the man my grandmother had called a person of unimpeachable integrity, Mr. Isaac Vance. I found his law firm, Vance and Associates, online. It was a respected, old-school estate planning firm in the city. I was nervous when I dialed the number, half expecting him to be retired or unreachable. A polite receptionist answered, and when I asked for Mr. Vance, she put me on hold. A moment later, a calm, deep voice came on the line. "This is Isaac Vance." I took a deep breath. "Mr. Vance, my name is Megan Jensen. You don't know me, but you knew my grandparents, Arthur and Alina Jensen." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then his voice warmed considerably. Arthur and Alina? Of course, I knew them. Arthur was one of the finest men I've ever known. It was a sad day when we lost them. How can I help you, Megan? The genuine kindness in his voice was so different from the cold calculation of my own family that it almost made me emotional. I explained the situation as concisely as I could. The ultimatum from my parents, their claim to the house through a trust, and my discovery of the hidden will and letter in the attic. "He said they set up a trust?" Isaac asked, a sharp edge to his voice. "And they are using that as the basis to evict you?" "Yes," I confirmed. "They claim it was my grandparents' wish." Isaac was silent for a moment. I could almost hear the gears turning in his methodical, legal mind. "Megan," he said finally, his voice grave, "your grandparents contacted me about 5 years ago, shortly before Arthur passed. They told me about the pressure your father was putting on them. They were deeply distressed. That's when we drafted the will you now hold. It was their express wish that you, and only you, inherit the house. They were very clear about their reasons. They feared your father would mismanage the property and leave you with nothing." His words confirmed everything my grandmother's letter had said. "Mr. Vance, can you help me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I would be honored to," he replied without hesitation. "Your grandparents were my friends. Upholding their true wishes is a duty I take very seriously. Can you come to my office this afternoon? Bring the documents you found, all of them." That afternoon, I sat in his stately, book-lined office, feeling a sense of security for the first time in days. Isaac Vance was in his late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a reassuring demeanor. He examined the will I had brought, nodding slowly. "This is perfect," he said. "Ironclad, witnessed, notarized, and properly executed. As your grandmother stated, its date makes it the superseding document. The other will or trust they possess is legally worthless." He then looked at the forged loan application I had also brought along. He studied the signatures, his brow furrowing. "This is a serious matter," he said grimly. "Attempted fraud is one thing, but if they filed a fraudulent will with the probate court, that's a felony. We need to see exactly what they've done." With my permission, Isaac and his team immediately got to work. His paralegal, a sharp young woman named Sarah, was dispatched to the county courthouse to pull the probate file for my grandmother's estate. While she was gone, Isaac and I strategized. "They've given you a deadline of Friday," he said. "We will use that to our advantage. They will be expecting you to be packing boxes. They will not be expecting a legal team. We will meet their aggression not with anger, but with the cold, hard weight of the law." He explained the plan. On Friday morning, he and another associate from his firm would be at the house with me. We would let my parents and brother arrive. We would let them state their intentions. And then, we would present them with the evidence. He was already drafting the documents. A formal notice asserting my legal ownership based on the valid will, a cease and desist letter ordering them to stop all contact and harassment, and a notice of potential legal action regarding the fraudulent probate filing. Sarah returned late in the afternoon, carrying a thick file. Her expression was grim. "You were right to be suspicious, Megan," she said, laying the file on Isaac's desk. "They didn't just file a will. They submitted a document creating a Jensen family irrevocable trust. It names Anthony as the sole trustee and Luke as the primary beneficiary. You are listed as a permissive resident, allowed to live in the house only at the discretion of the trustee." It was all there, in black and white. A legal document built on a foundation of lies. They had gone to another lawyer, one who didn't know the family history, and had them draft a trust, likely using the will they had coerced my grandparents into signing as the basis for it. Then they had filed it, believing no one would ever discover the true final will hidden in the attic. The most damning part was the date. They had filed it only 2 weeks after my grandmother's funeral, moving with sickening speed to secure what they believed was theirs. "This is worse than I thought," Isaac said, his voice low and angry. "This is a calculated, premeditated act of fraud against you and a desecration of your grandparents' memory." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a paternal mix of sympathy and steely resolve. "They have left us no choice. On Friday, we will not only defend your home, but we will also inform them of the severe legal consequences of their actions. Forgery, fraudulent filing, these are criminal offenses. We will give them one opportunity to walk away. sign over any false claim they have, and disappear from your life. If they refuse, we will pursue this to the fullest extent of the law." I nodded, my fear completely gone, replaced by an unshakable sense of justice. The paper trail they had created to steal my home was about to become the very thing that would bring them down. The trap they had set for me was about to spring shut on them. Thursday was the strangest day of my life. It was the day before my supposed eviction, and the house was quieter than ever. There were no moving boxes, no frantic packing, no tearful goodbyes to the home I loved. Instead, there was a profound and unsettling stillness, the kind of deep breath the world seems to take before a storm breaks. My phone buzzed incessantly. My mother sent a string of texts filled with manipulative platitudes. "I know this is hard, sweetie, but it's for the best. Your brother is so excited to get started on his new life." Followed by, "Have you found a place yet? I saw a cute little one-bedroom apartment for rent downtown. I can send you the link." Each message was a tiny, infuriating jab, a reminder of her complete disregard for my feelings. I followed Isaac's advice and responded to each one with a simple, non-committal, "I'm handling it." My father's approach was less subtle. He called twice, his voice gruff and impatient. "Just wanted to make sure you're on schedule, Megan. The truck is booked for 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow. We'll be there to help you with the last of your things. Don't make this difficult." The condescension in his tone was staggering. He wasn't offering to help, he was coming to supervise my expulsion. "I'll be ready, Dad," I replied, the double meanin'. G hanging in the air, completely lost on him. Luke, predictably, sent a single text in the afternoon. "Hey, can you leave the Wi-Fi password? And the key under the mat, THX. The sheer entitlement of it was almost comical. He truly believed that by Friday morning, my home, my life, and even my internet connection would seamlessly transition into being his. I spent the day in a state of hyperfocus. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, not as a way of packing, but as an act of defiance, of reclaiming my space. I polished the hardwood floors until they gleamed. I washed every window until the morning light poured in, unobstructed. I worked in the garden, pulling weeds and trimming the rose bushes my grandmother had planted. Every action was a quiet tribute to my grandparents and a reaffirmation of my resolve. This was my home and I was going to fight for it. In the afternoon, I spoke with Isaac again. He confirmed that everything was in place. He and his associate, a formidable-looking man named Robert, would arrive at my house at 8:30 a.m., a full half-hour before my family was due. He walked me through the plan one more time. I was to let them in. I was to remain calm and say as little as possible. I was to let him do the talking. "They will likely react with anger and denial," he warned. "They have built a reality for themselves based on this lie, and we are about to shatter it. Do not engage in a shouting match. Do not let them draw you into an emotional argument. We have the law, the facts, and the truth on our side. That is all we need." He also asked me a difficult question. "Megan, I have to know before we proceed. What is your desired outcome here? If they back down immediately, are you prepared to let the matter of the fraudulent filing rest? Or do you want to pursue criminal charges regardless?" I had to think about that for a long time. These were my parents and my brother. The idea of them facing jail time was horrifying, but what they had done was not just a mistake or a lapse in judgment. It was a calculated, cruel act of betrayal. They had tried to render me homeless and steal my inheritance, all to fuel my brother's delusions of grandeur. They had trampled on my grandparents' memory. "My goal is to secure my home and be free of them," I said finally, my voice steady. "I don't want to send them to prison, but I want them to understand the gravity of what they've done. I want them to face consequences. If they refuse to accept the truth tomorrow, if they fight us, then I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to protect myself and my grandparents' legacy." Isaac seemed satisfied with my answer. "A very measured response. We will present that as an option to them. A path to avoid prosecution, but it will come at a steep price. A legally binding agreement to never contact you again and to formally renounce any and all claims, real or imagined." That evening, I made myself a simple dinner and ate it in the dining room, using my grandmother's fine china. It felt like a ceremonial act, a final meal before a battle. As I sat there, surrounded by the silence, I looked at the photographs on the mantelpiece. There was one of my grandparents on their wedding day, young and full of hope. There was another of them with me as a child, sitting on the front porch swing. Their love was a tangible presence in the room. I felt an immense sense of responsibility to them. This fight wasn't just for me. It was for them. It was for Arthur and Alina, who had worked so hard and loved so deeply. It was for their trust in me to be the keeper of their home. As the sun set, casting long shadows through the sparkling clean windows, a sense of peace settled over me. The storm was coming, but I was not afraid. I was in the fortress my grandparents had built, and I was ready to defend it. The calm was over. It was time for the reckoning. Friday morning dawned bright and clear, a beautiful day for a demolition. I was up before the sun, my mind sharp and alert. I dressed not in packing clothes, but in a smart business casual outfit, dark trousers and a crisp blouse. I wanted to look composed, in control. I made coffee, my hands perfectly steady. The nervous energy of the past few days had coalesced into a solid core of determination. At exactly 8:30, a discreet black sedan pulled into my driveway. Isaac Vance and his associate, Robert, got out. Isaac, in a perfectly tailored suit, looked like the epitome of calm authority. Robert was a large, imposing man whose stoic expression alone could probably win a legal argument. They greeted me warmly but professionally at the door. "Are you ready, Megan?" Isaac asked gently. I nodded. "I am." We didn't have to wait long. At 9 o'clock, on the dot, a large U-Haul truck rumbled down the street and parked clumsily at the curb, its sides scraping against the branches of the old oak tree my grandfather had planted. My father's car pulled in behind it. Anthony, Victoria, and DeLuca emerged, their faces a mixture of grim satisfaction and impatience. My father marched up the walkway like a general leading a charge. He didn't even knock, just tried the handle, and finding it locked, banged his fist on the door. "Megan, let's get this show on the road." I took a deep breath and opened the door. I stepped back to let them in, my expression neutral. My father strode into the entryway, followed by my mother and Luke. He was about to start barking orders when he stopped dead. His eyes fell on Isaac and Robert, who were standing quietly in the living room. Confusion warred with annoyance on his face. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, gesturing at them. "These are my legal representatives," I said, my voice clear and even. My mother's practiced smile faltered. Luke, who had been scrolling on his phone, finally looked up, his eyes widening in surprise. "Legal representatives?" My father scoffed, a dark flush creeping up his neck. "What is this? Some kind of stunt to try and get more time? I told you the deadline is today." Isaac stepped forward, extending a hand that my father ignored. "Mr. Jensen, my name is Isaac Vance. I was the personal attorney and a close friend of Arthur and Alina Jensen." The mention of his connection to my grandparents visibly rattled my father. "I never heard of you," he blustered. "Their lawyer was Mr. Gable." "Mr. Gable handled some of their affairs, yes," Isaac said smoothly. "But I handled their more sensitive estate planning. We are here today to discuss the legal ownership of this property." He gestured to the coffee table, where he had laid out several files. "Please, have a seat. This won't take long." My father remained standing, crossing his arms stubbornly. "There's nothing to discuss. The house is in a family trust. I'm the trustee. It's my decision who lives here. Now, if you're done wasting my time, my daughter has a truck to load." Isaac's calm demeanor never wavered. "The trust you're referring to," he said, opening one of the files, "the one filed with the county probate court on March 12th of last year, is, unfortunately, fraudulent and invalid." The color drained from my father's face. My mother let out a small gasp and sat down heavily on the edge of the armchair. "That's a lie," Anthony sputtered. "It's a legal document." "It is a document, yes," Isaac corrected gently. "But it is not legally binding, because it was superseded by a more recent testamentary document. I have here the true and final will of Arthur and Alina Jensen, executed 1 month after the document you hold, and witnessed by myself and my partner." He slid a copy across the coffee table. "This will, their actual final wish, bequeaths this property and all its contents directly and solely to their granddaughter, Megan Jensen." My father stared at the document as if it were a venomous snake. Luke snatched it up, his eyes scanning the page frantically. "What is this? This is fake," he stammered. "No," I said, speaking for the first time. "It's not. I found it in Grandma's cedar chest along with a letter explaining everything." I looked directly at my mother. "She knew you would do this. Both of them did." Victoria began to cry, quiet, theatrical sobs into her hands. "We were only trying to do what was best for the family. By forging my grandparents' signatures on a loan application," I shot back, my voice like ice. "By coercing them into signing a will they didn't want, by filing a fraudulent trust to steal my inheritance." My father's face went from white to purple with rage. "You have no proof," he roared. Isaac held up another document. "Actually, we do. We have handwriting experts who can attest to the forgery on the loan application you tried to file. And more importantly, we have this will, which invalidates your entire claim. Filing a fraudulent document with the probate court is a felony, Mr. Jensen. It carries a penalty of significant fines and potential prison time." The word prison hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Luke dropped the will onto the table as if it had burned him. The reality of their situation was finally crashing down on them. They weren't dealing with their compliant daughter anymore. They were dealing with the full force of the law. My father, for the first time in his life, looked utterly defeated. He sank onto the sofa, his bluster completely gone, replaced by a look of sheer panic. Isaac let the silence stretch for a long moment before speaking again. "However," he said, his tone measured, "Megan is a compassionate woman. She is not interested in sending her own family to prison." A flicker of hope appeared in my parents' eyes. "She is prepared to not report this felony to the district attorney on one condition." He pushed a final document across the table. "This is a settlement agreement. In it, you will affirm that Megan is the sole legal owner of this house. You will renounce any and all claims to the property. You will return any items you may have taken from the house after a liener's passing. And finally, you will agree to a permanent no-contact order. You will not call, email, text, or come within 500 feet of Megan or this property ever again. Sign it, and this matter is closed. Refuse and my knee. XD call will be to the authorities." They stared at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. Their grand plan, their triumphant eviction, had turned into a nightmare of their own making. Their faces, which had been so full of smug certainty when they arrived, were now pale masks of horror and disbelief. The house my grandparents built was safe, and I, finally, was free. The silence that followed Isaac's ultimatum was the sound of a world ending. For my parents and brother, the reality they had constructed, one where they were entitled to my home and my future, had been systematically dismantled in under 10 minutes. There was no negotiation, no shouting, no room for their usual manipulations. There was only the stark, legal truth laid bare on the coffee table. My father, Anthony, looked like a deflated balloon. All the bluster, the arrogance, the righteous indignation had evaporated, leaving behind a gray, withered-looking man. He picked up the pen with a trembling hand, not even bothering to read the full agreement. He knew he was trapped. He signed his name, his signature a weak, spidery scrawl. My mother, Victoria, was next. Her quiet sobs had subsided, replaced by a look of utter desolation. She signed her name without looking at me, her movements stiff and robotic. Finally, Isaac pushed the document toward Luke. My brother, who had been staring into space with a look of slack-jawed disbelief, flinched. "This is insane," he whispered. "Megan, you can't do this to us. We're family." "You stopped being my family when you decided to throw me out of my home," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "You chose this. Sign the paper, Luke." He looked at my father as if expecting him to intervene, to fix it, as he had always done. But my father just stared at the floor, defeated. Luke angrily snatched the pen and scribbled his signature. Isaac took the signed documents, reviewed them, and placed them neatly back into his briefcase. "Very good," he said with an air of finality. "My associate, Robert, will escort you off the premises. A courier will deliver your copies of this agreement later today. Remember the terms. Any violation of the no-contact order will result in immediate legal action." Robert stood up and gestured toward the door. The three of them rose like zombies, their movements slow and uncoordinated. They shuffled out of the house they had tried to steal without another word, not one of them daring to look back at me. I watched through the window as they got into their car, a silent, broken trio. The U-Haul truck they had hired remained at the curb, a monument to their failed ambition. A few minutes later, the driver, who had been waiting patiently, knocked on the door to ask what was going on. My father had already paid for the rental, so I simply told the man there had been a change of plans and he was no longer needed. He shrugged and drove away, taking the last remnant of their disastrous plan with him. When they were all gone, I turned to Isaac. "Thank you," I said, the words feeling inadequate for what he had done. "I couldn't have done this without you." He smiled warmly. "Your grandparents did this, Megan. Their love and foresight protected you. I was just the messenger." He packed his briefcase and prepared to leave. "Call me if you need anything at all, but I have a feeling you're going to be just fine." After he left, I walked through the silent house. It didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like home. Truly, unconditionally mine for the first time. The weight of my family's expectations, their judgment, and their suffocating presence had been lifted. The air felt lighter. Over the next few weeks, I began the process of healing and reclaiming. I went through every room and packed away anything that held a negative memory, anything that reminded me of them. I donated my mother's old books, which she'd stored here for years. I threw out the framed photos of us as a happy family. It was a painful but necessary purge. Then I started making the house my own. I painted the living room a warm, calming sage green. I bought a new, comfortable sofa to replace the stiff, formal one my mother had picked out years ago. I turned Luke's old bedroom, which had been kept as a shrine to his childhood, into a bright, airy home gym. I spent my weekends in the garden, planting new flowers and building a small vegetable patch, feeling a connection to my grandparents with my hands in the same soil they had once tilled. The no-contact order was a blessing. The silence from their end was profound. I heard through the grapevine of distant relatives that they had been forced to sell their own house to cover the debts my father had accrued and to give Luke a down payment for a small apartment across town. He never did launch his lifestyle brand. The shame of their public failure was, in its own way, a form of justice. I never sought to punish them further. The legal agreement was enough. My victory wasn't in their ruin, but in my own peace. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the front porch swing in the evening, I think about them. I feel a flicker of sadness for the family I should have had, but it's quickly replaced by a deep sense of gratitude for the family I did have, for Arthur and Alina. They gave me more than a house.